He apparently died in a knife fight in Deptford, stabbed through the eye at the age of 29. 2 weeks after he died, the very first work with the name William Shakespeare was published. I came out of my childhood with such low self-esteem as a result of that. It set me up for that abusive relationship. The open misogyny that we're seeing now is actually fantastic.
Go on.
They're completely exposing how totally unsuitable for women they are. Well, guys, you don't get to procreate. I feel the need to share this story because I haven't, and I have been silenced, and it feels important.
2, 1, rolling.
This is StoryCo, the podcast about the business of story and storytelling. I'm James Kirkham. Let's get into it. My guest today has spent her whole life on one question. Who gets to tell the story? She wrote a novel in the voice of Christopher Marlowe she theorised might have written the greatest plays in the English language under another man's name, William Shakespeare. It won the Desmond Elliott Prize. Ros Barber's been a mainframe programmer, a beekeeper, a band frontwoman, a goldsmith's lecturer, a cleaner, and the person who standardised the baby change sign across an entire continent. For 8 years, she was married to a man who never hit her, but who quietly took her story away. Ros has been getting it back ever since, in a memoir, on a Substack thousands of readers strong, and in a pirate novel her own agent calls Booker-worthy. Ros, before we get into the meat of the show, we always start with 4 simple words. Tell me a story.
So I'm in my first pregnancy, and I've come to the end of my programming contract, and I discover that my husband, who's also a software programmer, has just delivered a piece of software to an insurance company that doesn't work because our best man at our wedding was a secret drunk, and he had just made all front end, and it was all front end, there was nothing behind it. And so 6 months pregnant, I try and save the company and save our house by working through the night, actually making from scratch this whole system. My husband, he was a fairly new husband at that point, about a year in, he's just, he has a sort of breakdown. He just lies on the sofa and watches movies. Says, I don't know the language. I don't know the language either, but I don't want to give birth in a tent in my sister-in-law's garden. So I learned C++ from scratch.
Wow.
And I write the system. The insurance company is getting angry because we're past date, and I'm about 6 weeks from my due date. I finish it, and I drive to Redhill on my own. I hadn't had sleep for the whole last night. I'd done 36 hours straight, and I'm falling asleep at the wheel. I'm slapping myself to stay awake. I go and take the meeting. I deliver the system. I come back and I go into premature labour.
Oh, God.
The baby born early he's not a bad weight. He's 6 pounds, but he doesn't breathe properly. He needs to be ventilated. He's taken to the special baby care unit. They won't even let me touch him. At first, he's just in this incubator, and I'm pumping out colostrum, sort of hoping to save his life. He has 2 life-threatening moments. And the insurance company fax us, it's in the days of faxes, and say, we've got a few little tweaks. And I come home from the hospital, leaving my baby there, still in danger. And I make the tweaks, and I send it off to them, and I go back to the hospital. And then after 12 days, the baby is well enough to bring him home. And he's a tiny little thing, and I can hold him in my hand, this little bum just sitting in my hand, just hold him on my shoulder. And he's only been home a couple of days. He's not even due to be born yet, by several weeks. And I'm breastfeeding him, and my husband looks across, and he says, if there was a fire and you could only save one of us, which one would you save?
Wow.
And I gave him the wrong answer. I said, well, obviously, you're a 6'2" guy and your legs work. I would save our helpless little infant son, and I hope you would too. And that was the wrong answer. He was so angry that he then didn't speak to me for weeks. We had this new baby. He responded to everything I asked of him like I wasn't there, like I was a ghost. And that was the beginning of a coercively controlling relationship, which up till then, I'd thought was okay.
An incredible story. Tragic in many ways. Take me back then to the start. Let's go back a little bit before that. I read that you were punished as a child for saying what you felt, so you ended up writing it down instead. Is that true? That feels very poignant.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, the writer William Nicholson, who wrote the screenplay for Gladiator and quite a few successful children's books, said at a literature festival I was at once, he said, all writers really want is for mummy to pat them on the head.
Oh, wow. And do you think that's the case?
So true.
Really?
I think that's why a lot of people write. They want love, you know, and my mum was she was unhappily married to my father. And she set that right in her own way by marrying someone who was, from my perspective, much worse. For me, my dad was a loving person when I was a little girl. They announced they were breaking up. It felt like out of the blue because they had completely hidden their unhappiness from us. And the next day, this man moved in who was my best friend's father. So it was really awkward. And he didn't like children at all. And he certainly didn't like the children of the man he considered his competitor. And I was really angry about this. I was very upset. I was 8 years old. And I objected and I let it be known. I was angry about the new arrangements. But it wasn't okay. It wasn't allowed. My mum really desperately needed this to be a happy ending for all of us.
And tried to shortcut and accelerate to that moment.
She was happy. And she needed us all to shut up and put up with it. And so if I ever opened my mouth about anything, about saying I was unhappy about it, and it was obviously a problem. And I did get punished for what I said, and so I started writing. And I was already a big reader, and I loved Harriet the Spy, the book Harriet the Spy, and I became Harriet the Spy. So I got my little notebook, and I started observing everybody,
and
my family, and writing all about them.
Oh God, how cool!
Yeah, it wasn't a popular move.
Your little notebook of observations. My God, that must be unbelievable.
But it was my survival mechanism, and writing became the way that I was able to express myself safely. And I felt that if I could turn things into stories and poems, that maybe I could express how I felt to people and they would understand, especially my mum. So I would very often write poems and read them to my mum in the hope that I would be communicating something that wouldn't get me into trouble.
Do you think, looking back, it is entirely around the seeking of praise and ultimately the seeking of love that writing was intended to do?
Well, the funny thing was that I had decided or believed that I was a writer from a really early age before any of this kicked in. When I was about 4, I remember thinking I was a writer.
That's incredible. Where did that come from then? Was it around you? Were you surrounded in?
No, I think pre-birth. I came in.
Oh, I love that.
I came in just as a writer.
Ready.
And then I've just spent a lifetime trying to persuade other people that it was true.
Well, I think you've done all right.
I was so determined to write that when I was, it was preschool, so pre-4 probably.
Gosh.
My mum used to put me up for my I asked her to teach me to read and write because she was actually a teacher, and she refused because she said teachers don't like that. They don't like it if you come to their reception class and you can read and write because they need everyone to be at the same level.
Wow.
Otherwise it makes their lives difficult.
I'm sure they'd love that now.
So she wouldn't teach me. So I taught myself. So I had books that had been read to me enough times that I knew what the words were on the page. Wow. And when I was supposed to be taking my afternoon nap, I'd take some tracing paper or some very thin paper and I would put it over the words and I would trace the words and sound them out. So I mean,
that's astonishing. That is incredibly unique.
I was just sure that I was a writer and I needed this skill and I needed it as soon as possible. So I was already writing poems and stories. And then when my parents split up, it went into overdrive, because then it became a survival mechanism.
A survival mechanism and an obsession and a passion and a hobby. So did you know you were good in it, but when did you start realising that it was just that you could achieve survival, that money would be the consequence of your written skills?
Do you know, this is going to also sound ridiculously early, but when I was 6...
Of course.
I wrote a story at my infant school that so impressed my teacher, she showed it to the headmistress, and the headmistress gave me a box of Smarties. Now, those boxes of Smarties, my mum had 4 kids. We never got a box of Smarties. I would see them in the cinema when we went to Saturday morning pictures, and we'd be lucky to get a tube at Christmas. You know, my mum was really strapped for cash. And I was given this whole box for myself for a story I wrote when I was 6, and I went, this is it.
How wonderful. Were there moments there, were there kind of key points where you said, this is something I could pursue? Because I know when I look at the CV, there's a lot on there, right? You've been a programmer, a beekeeper, you've been a band front woman, a lecturer. Like, this is quite the variety.
It's probably too much for one podcast. But I did my biology degree, and then I thought, now I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to take a year out, and I'm going to... because doing my degree, I had been writing a poem a day since I was 13. So I'd written thousands of poems. That was my commitment to getting really good at it.
How wonderful.
And then during my degree...
Do you still have them?
I do. Apart from the first book, which I burned because I was embarrassed about it when I was in my 20s.
That's a shame.
I know. It was doggerel.
I bet it's incredible.
Well, it was my apprentice phase. But I'd had to drop that when I was at university because life got busy.
Sure.
But then I thought, OK, I finished my degree. I'm going to take a year to write. And in that time, I earned £40. And I thought, I might need a second string to my bow.
Yeah.
Because £40 isn't going to cut it.
So really it was born from necessity, this kind of...
Yeah.
So again, someone like me in front of you today looking back, I'm going, wow, multi-dimensional, multifaceted, can do all these things. But you're saying, again, it was driven from a moment of adulation, and then it's from necessity. Survival, as you said earlier.
So I thought, how can I earn a good living that will still allow me to write? I wasn't sure about the answer to that question. Then I saw an advert from a blue chip company that said, we will train graduates in any discipline to do computer programming. And I'd actually done the first computer studies at O-level, the year it came out. Our maths teacher built, actually the first year we were doing mainframe programming, punch cards, punch tapes, sending it to Chelmsford, to a mainframe in Chelmsford. They'd run it through. You'd get the results back and you go, oh no, error in line 2. And now you, really simple typo, and now you have to send it off and wait another week.
That's phenomenal.
So painful. In the second year, he built from a kit a little PC, and we could book time on that PC, and we could run our punch tape through it. Gosh. And so that was what is
that? Late 70s, early 80s?
Yeah, late 70s, 79, 80.
God.
And so I did that. So I did BASIC and assembler. So I knew I loved it and that I was good at it, and I'd got an A. So they said, we'll train you in computer programming. I went, yeah, you will. So I went, I took all their tests. I had a great moment, one of my favourite moments. I turned up for this thing in a jumper with holes in it because it wasn't the interview. It was just the aptitude test. And I had no money. I'd been on the dole for a year.
Yeah.
And every other person in that room was a man. It was 40 men, and they were all in suits and ties. And I thought, I've made a terrible mistake. But I sat and did my test. And at the end of it, they took the papers away. They said, wait here. We're going to score them. And when I come back... this woman who became my manager she said, when I come back, I'm going to read a list of names, and if I don't read your name, go home. And she came back in the room and she read my name, and that was it.
Oh, God.
Nobody else's.
Really?
No one else got through that batch of...
Isn't that incredible?
And it was great, And so I got trained on their 6-month trainee program in COBOL and...
Unbelievable.
COBOL and JCL.
Sure. But this is one funny already. Your brain's so fascinating because it's like left and right side all at once,
yes,
right?
Yes, it is both of those.
That's quite rare, isn't it?
It is, but my parents, who were both... my mum studied natural sciences at Cambridge.
Right.
And got a first and was offered a place on Watson and Crick's DNA discovering team and turned it down to marry my father.
Oh, wow.
Big mistake, apart from obviously I'm here. But
So the guys who discovered the double helix...
Yeah.
She turned that down.
She turned down replacing Rosalind Franklin's role as an X-ray crystallographer.
So there's a smart there that comes straight from your mum, right?
Yeah, and my dad too. So my dad was a physicist. They were both really talented musicians. My mum was a junior exhibitioner at the Royal College of Music. She played the piano and the cello to top standard. And my dad was a really good flautist. Wow. And they used to play music together, as a hobby at the weekends.
There's a line or a quote that I read when I knew we were meeting today that I basically said, wow, you say the people who love us write the first false biography of us. Unpack that a little bit, can you? Tell me a bit more about that, because my God, that's a good line.
Well, people make up stories about other people, starting with the people they're closest to. You get an idea about who someone is. You must have had that experience of someone you knew when you were a child, and they've taken some version of you or some story about your life, and they've decided that's who you are. So based on the fact that I was very unhappy when I was 9, for example, and that I did a couple of things which were extremely, disturbed, I will say, definitely. I was quite a disturbed child. I was having a bad time. But that got written into my character. That got written as, this is who this person is.
Became your identity in those.
In their eyes. And then it becomes really hard sometimes for people who knew you at certain stages of your life and who were close to you. So the people who love you, or at least were meant to love you, that they have a version of you that is completely wrong. And I feel that writing my own story and now writing memoir, which I'm doing on Substack at the moment, is about correcting the record. It's like telling your own story, because there are so many false stories about me out there. And I think that's true of everybody.
Let's get into that then. The driver of what you are writing right now is still this correction of a record that's lasted decades.
I don't think I'm troubled by people's... there's nothing you can actually do about people's false opinions of you. You can't change them. So I'm probably not speaking to those people anyway.
You can be more immune to that.
What I'm really interested in is how we internalise the stories that other people tell about us and how that impacts upon us. So if we decide, based on what other people's opinions are, we think that something that they think about us is true. If we take control of that and we write our own stories, we can tell a very different and better story. So I've kind of gone into my past because I wanted to particularly understand how I got into that abusive relationship. And I needed to understand how it wasn't my fault, because I think there's always a lot of victim blaming when it comes to getting into controlling or abusive relationships. But your earlier relationships will have set you up for that, which is also not to blame the family. There's no blame, no shame here. This is generational trauma that pours down through your parents, from your grandparents, from your great-grandparents. My parents were actually children when there were bombs falling in London.
Yeah.
Right? So when my mum said, when I was 8 or 9, you have a golden childhood, what are you moaning about? You should be happy. Now, as an adult, I can look back at that and I can go, actually, fair enough. As an 8 or 9-year-old, I didn't understand that at all.
And it would be impossible for you to, right? I can't not ask you a little bit about the Marlowe papers. You wrote a whole novel basically in the voice of a dead man that you theorised his life's work was published under someone else's name. Explain a little bit about it. This is multi-award winning after all.
Well, again, it started with the necessity to earn a living. My second husband got chronically ill, got ME, and I suddenly realised I needed to up my earning game, and I knew that the only way I could get a proper university position teaching creative writing, because I'd been teaching as an associate tutor for many years, was to get a PhD. I couldn't afford to self-fund, so I needed to get funding, so I needed a big idea. I needed something that really needed to be researched at university. And then I was watching a documentary it was in Shakespeare Week, and it was about the theory that the 16th century playwright Christopher Marlowe was the true author of the works of Shakespeare. And I don't know if you know anything about Christopher Marlowe.
I don't personally.
No.
Well, I didn't until I knew I was meeting you today.
Right,
I read a
okay.
small amount.
So he was born in the same year as William Shakespeare. He pretty much invented blank verse drama. He was a really successful dramatist in his 20s. And quite a exciting, controversial figure. He worked as a spy for the Elizabethan government, Elizabeth I's government.
Amazing.
And then he apparently died in a knife fight in Deptford, stabbed through the eye at the age of 29. And 2 weeks after he died, the very first work with the name William Shakespeare was published. And it was in a style very similar to Marlowe's style. So late Marlowe and early Shakespeare are really hard to tell apart, including by computer algorithms. And of course, I've done some of that testing as well, which is fun. So at this point, I've never heard of the theory before, but I thought, this is a great idea for a novel.
Really, though?
Right? It's meaty, And I can really get behind the idea of being this. Imagine being an absolute creative genius who writes the greatest works of English literature. You don't know that at that time, but, they're these amazing works of literature, but you don't get any credit for it. And I thought, as a struggling writer myself, I was thinking, I
can empathise.
I can empathise. All I have to do is take what I actually feel and then just exaggerate it. And I could really get into that character and play that character and be him. So I made the pitch for it. I got the funding. I started writing the novel. I started my PhD. I began writing the novel. I wrote a few attempts at the beginning, and I'd already committed that I was going to write it in the first person and that I was going to write it in blank verse, in iambic pentameter, to sound Shakespearean.
Incredible.
Okay. But once I started writing it, I realised, hang on. I am pretending to be the greatest writer of all time. And I have no actual evidence to support the fact that I'm up to the task. Like, what a horrendous act of hubris that I have committed to. And if I don't do it, I will lose my funding, which is my only income right now, to support my family. So I thought I just better knuckle down and do it. And then I had a brilliant idea. I thought, I will ask the spirit of Christopher Marlowe to write the book. I will literally go, I call upon you to write the book through me. I will be the secretary. I'll be like your amanuensis.
This is amazing.
And then, right, if it's brilliant, great, well done. If it's shit, it's not my fault. Okay? And all I have to do is turn up and just take dictation every day. And with this mental trick,
That's so good.
I wrote the book. Initially, I sent it to my existing agent, who had already failed to place 3 novels of mine. And then I came to her with the Marlowe papers. And I said, look, I've got this great novel written in iambic pentameter. And she probably shook her head in despair, but she was at the end of an email, so I didn't see it. And she said, I can't submit this to a publisher. It has no commercial potential. Why don't you send it to your poetry publisher? Which for me was like rowing it out to sea, 4 years' work, and just dropping it in.
100%.
Drop it in the ocean, because no one's going to see it. And I thought, I'm sure it must have some commercial potential. And I had a student of mine who was really successful, who'd gone on to have like multi-book deals,
Awesome.
Stuff that had gone to auction that I'd supervised when I was her supervisor. And she knew about this project the whole time I was writing it. And I said to her, hey, listen, my agent says this has no commercial potential. You know commercial. What do you think? Would you have a look at it? I sent her the first 30 pages. She said she printed them out. She read them on the train going up to meet her agent in London. And she got to the end of the 30 pages and went, where's the rest?
Oh, awesome.
And she was so excited about it. And then she spent half her meeting with her agent talking about it.
I love that.
And then she sent me a text saying, Rupert wants to see the rest of it. Will you send it to him? So he saw it. He read it in a weekend. He got in touch with me. He said, he sent me a message on the Saturday, said, can I ring you on Monday? And on the Monday he said, can I represent you? He said, I've been waiting my whole life for something like this.
Oh, wow.
Could you give your other agent 30 days notice? And then at the end of that 30 days, I'll submit it. And within 5 days, he had a deal for me, a big deal.
I love that.
With a major publisher. And then it won awards.
Good for you. What you're writing now, you're self-publishing effectively through your Substack, right?
I am, yeah. I mean, it's not what I would choose.
Yeah,
but
how come?
The publishing market has changed a lot in recent years, and I spent 8 years writing a book that is far too long for the current market.
Really? So that's the thing. You can't write long books anymore?
Paper prices have gone up, printing costs have gone up.
Is it really down to that?
And I do not have 500,000 TikTok followers or Instagram followers. And that now platform is everything, because the book market has shrunk a lot. People are reading less. People's attention spans are fractured. Another reason for being against long books. Everything has changed while I was writing that book. And I arrogantly went on writing an absolutely massive female pirate epic. What can I say? I was...
Go on, tell us a little bit more. And I love that description, female pirate epic.
I'm really interested in Mary Read, the pirate who's at the centre of my story. And I was most interested in her because of all the female pirates. I look generally at the whole female pirate thing. She was the only female pirate who didn't get into piracy through a man. She didn't get into piracy through a husband or a father, or a lover. She was a soldier before she was
Really?
a pirate. She lived most of her life undercover,
What era are
passing
we
as a man.
talking?
We're talking 18th century, early 18th century. She started from childhood. Her mother got her to pretend to be her brother in order to gain an inheritance.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is great.
So it was such a great story. I wanted to tell the whole story and not just the piratey at sea bit. And that's another...
Yeah, presumably the piracy at sea bit was the bit that people might latch onto and a kind of
Of course, that's what
post-Pirates
people
of the-
want. But I was so fascinated by her whole life and how you go from being a working class child in a Devon fishing village to becoming one of the most notorious female pirates of the age, via being a footboy in London and then being a soldier
story.
in the Low Countries, in the Spanish Wars of Succession.
The entire female piracy thing, I might be very ignorant, but it's not a thing I knew. It's certainly not maybe the classic kind of Disney movie version that I was aware of.
Yeah, they were very rare, the female pirates. Obviously, it's pretty hard. Well, it was unlucky to have a woman on board. You weren't supposed to ever bring women on board. I bet it was pretty unlucky for the women as well.
Gosh.
Right? Because the men are at sea from weeks or months at end. They're sex-starved. You don't want to be exposed as a woman in that position. So they couldn't have openly joined a crew until it came to when she ends up with Jack Rackham, who has 2 women on his crew. Because I have him as a fairly enlightened guy in 18th century terms. Actually, the pirate communities were pretty enlightened. They
Really?
were, it was a very sort of oppressive time, and they were fairly democratic. And
So it was an antidote to the oppression. It was a more freedom.
yeah, I mean, for example, they had a lot of black crew who had,
Yeah.
many of them escaped slavery
Yeah.
in the Caribbean.
Gosh.
And there was a degree of equality. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't perfect, but considering the times, there was a degree of equality. And pirate captains were voted in. The shares distributed of bounty
Love this.
were extremely equal, apart from the captain, I think, and the quartermaster would basically get double shares. But they didn't get like CEOs nowadays who get, 1,000 times what the workers get.
Just double.
Just double. For now, I'm serialising it in a kind of Dickens type mode, just because otherwise it's sitting in my...
So
On my
you
hard
have
drive.
it completed?
Yes.
But you are only releasing each chapter on a weekly basis?
Yes.
There's something in that, and I'm assuming your many followers on Substack, for example, it becomes this point of anticipation and you wait for it, right?
That is, I mean, so far that's what I'm hearing back. People are going, I can't wait
That's
for
so
next
nice.
week. I'm really hoping to build it. So I've only fairly recently, I think we're about 7 or 8 chapters in, so we're not very far in. But I'm hoping that part of the joy of it is the idea that everyone's reading it at the same time.
Love
So
that.
it's that old thing like you would wait for an episode of your favourite show and everyone would watch it together and actually be sharing it.
I think that's legit.
Yeah, because there's not enough of that at the moment. A sense of
100%.
community around enjoying cultural objects.
You rarely can.
I think you just got to move with the times that we're in, and this is where we are.
Because you worry because you're on a platform that's flying at the moment. Substack is in great health. So maybe some people, myself included, might go, oh, so long form's fine. We don't need to worry about attention spans and so on. Do you think that's an anomaly, for example? Do you think we are just sat there consuming clips actually and getting anyone to actually read for any length of time is hard work?
I think it genuinely is. But I think Substack is where the people who want long form have gone. It is... it really has proper readers there, and it's been a joy to find them. I got on the internet very early, as you can probably imagine, because I was a programmer, very early days of Usenet and all the rest of it. And
does it remind you of some of the old days at all?
No, because I was on Blogger, right? For example,
that was what
blogged.
I was going to get to.
Of course, I was on Blogger. It's got a much stronger community sense than Blogger, and a much better algorithm, and the way that it finds readers for you is excellent.
That's interesting.
So I came to it with a very, very quiet, static list that I'd had for about 10 years. I hadn't really changed. I had 750 subscribers, and it hadn't really changed in all that time. And I'd worked really hard at trying to bring people in, and then every time I'd put a newsletter out, I'd lose as many as I had gained. So it just stayed at the same level, and I took it to Substack. And, within a couple of months, I'd doubled it. And then it just kept growing.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the writing's brilliant, but do you put anything else? Do you put it down to anything else? Are there any other tactics, people watching and listening, and they might be thinking, or writers, perhaps like a younger you or a version of you who have just been pushed back and knocked back with their ideas, thinking, oh, maybe it's for me?
You have to engage with the community there.
Interesting.
You absolutely have to. And I don't do it because, it's not work for me. I don't go, oh no, I have to interact with people on Substack. I'm going, thank goodness, some human beings I can talk to.
That's nice.
And I really like talking to them.
And is it always just about, for example, in this instance, the last chapter of the book, or could it be anything?
Oh, no. I am very involved in, I would say, sexual politics at the moment.
Really?
Because it's, a lot of people I notice on Substack and on Threads, which I also hang out in a bit. Ever since the Epstein files and the Pellico case and things like the recent rape case where the two teenage boys got a non-custodial sentence, women are not very happy about any of this. And I've written quite a few posts on, I suppose, sexual politics. Be worth saying, and I get very, very big responses to it. I quite often do it with through a comedy lens. I like comedy.
Go on, explain for those who've not read, because these don't seem terribly comedic.
I appreciate that. I did one last year saying misogynists are my new best friends. So that was my take, and it was really like the open misogyny that we're seeing now is actually fantastic.
Go on.
Because
I'm willing to go with it. But
what I will say to you is I'm a much better writer than a speaker. So you really have to read the piece, because that's where I do all the magic. Fair. That's where all the good stuff comes through. But it's the premise of it is that I can make a lot of jokes out of the fact that these guys are idiots, and they are completely exposing how totally unsuitable for women they are. And thank you very much, guys, for flagging it up. Because now we can thoroughly avoid you, like you used to mask.
That's great.
Now you are out openly misogynistic, saying you want us back in the kitchen and you want us to make you sandwiches. Well, guys, you don't get to procreate.
Do you find, again, this is a super healthy time then for discourse? And Substack's just one platform, but is there a healthier discourse?
It really depends where you look, I think, on that one, because I think it's still poisonous in a lot of places, and especially as a woman, it's really hard to be heard or speak up without, just getting a lot of hate and a lot of death threats and rape threats. And I left Twitter as was because of that, because it was just impossible. I'm really good at emotional regulation, and I have means of feeling fine about things, but it's still not worth it, because that stuff does get under your skin. And, that's the thing that I think is good about Substack. The algorithm does not seem to prioritise in any way rage bait and outrage. And So you can curate a really good feed of intelligent, thoughtful stuff. And I've had conversations with people in the social arm of it, Notes, where we disagree. And you think, oh, that could easily go off the rails on another platform.
But it just...
And it doesn't. We end up being civil to each other. And that, that's a breath of fresh air, really, isn't it?
And commercially too, it works, right? Or
it's paying my mortgage at the moment.
Isn't that incredible?
Right?
Fantastic. But that's fantastic. It feels like a long time since you've got to be huge on, say, a platform like YouTube to get even close to that.
Yeah, you don't have to be huge on Substack to get it to pay your mortgage, which is amazing. And
so why would you ever want it published as a book again? I'm sounding facetious.
I love a book. I'm, as an object.
The physical
a sort
object.
Of fetish object. I love a book. And I love the smell of paper.
Same.
I like a physical thing I can weigh in my hands. And I do hope to see it in that form.
Well, I'm sure you will.
And I know readers like that too.
Tell me a little bit, and you've mentioned a couple of times, whether it be basically, well, your opening story, I think, that has a trauma attached to it. There was a nature of the relationship that was ultimately abusive, but he was terribly charming too. Can you go into that a little bit? How's that affected you? Clearly, it's affected your writing now than what we've just talked about in the discourse on Substack. What did you learn?
Yeah, I learnt that I had value, which I think my childhood taught me I didn't.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, because my parents, well, really not so much my dad, but my mum and my stepfather, I don't think they realised the damage that was inflicted on us. And I think it was a much less aware generation.
I agree.
They did, however, there was a fundamental issue with my childhood, which was that my mum had no money to speak of. She was part-time. She had a part-time teaching thing. Well, she was full-time eventually, but a special needs teacher, having been a chemistry teacher originally. She had 4 children, and my stepfather, I didn't know this was the reason why. I should hasten to add, it's really important. Because if I'd known this, I think I would have told a very different story about it. But they had a system in place, which I always described as food apartheid, which was that we had a cupboard of food that was just for the kids and a cupboard of food that was for my stepfather. And he had Kellogg's cornflakes and we had wavy line cornflakes, He had Kerrygold butter and we had cooking margarine in big 1 kilo tubs that smelled like engine oil. And he had gold top milk and we had silver top milk, and every single food item was completely separated. And we weren't allowed to touch his food, and all of our food was cheap and nasty. And we had separate meal times where we had bread and jam for tea every day for 10 years. And we would only have hot food or something other than bread and jam on Tuesdays and Saturdays when his daughters came to visit, at which point real food would happen. But they would get served first, and sometimes it ran out before it got to us. And so we were absolutely at the bottom of the pile every single mealtime for 10 years. And what that taught me was I was just a sort of third-class citizen. It just drills into you, you're not as good as the other people in the house. I learnt to steal the food, the good food, without being caught. It made me sneaky. That was, if I said anything was unfair, she'd say life's unfair. Well, it certainly was. But I came out of my childhood with such low self-esteem as a result of that, and other related things. But I think that's the primary thing.
And do you believe that the low self-esteem carried then into a relationship?
Absolutely. Because I was a person who was desperate to be loved, who was desperate to have someone who thought I was worthy. I didn't feel that the way my mum allowed that to happen, that I was worthy. I only worked out in my mid-30s that it was a money thing. They had separate bank accounts and she had to pay for 4 children on her teacher salary, and he was a wealthy GP and he thought he could eat handsomely and he deserved to eat handsomely. And he didn't want to pay for her children. And this suddenly landed on me when I found myself being a cheapskate with my children at a stall. I was at the Green Gathering, and it was a concession, and it was crepes. And I was going, right, I'm going to have the black cherry crepe with the cream and all of this stuff. And I said to my kids, you're going to have the lemon and sugar. You're going to have...
So it passed on.
The cheap... And I suddenly went, oh, what am I doing? I'm doing what my evil stepfather did. Why the hell am I doing that? Because I'm trying to save money. Oh, okay. Because I had 3 kids and like 3 lots of cheap crepes, obviously. 3 expensive crepes I couldn't really stretch to. But I'm going to have the expensive crepe myself because I deserve it because I'm the adult. And I went, oh no, here we go. And suddenly everything fell into place. And I thought, oh, it was money. I was emotionally abused for 10 years because of money. That's bad. But it set me up for that abusive relationship because he did the classic thing that people do to trick women, and it is often women, I will say. It's not only, but mostly, is that you love bomb them. So you put them on the pedestal. You say that they're a goddess, they're gorgeous, they're the one for you. The other thing is you can't believe that that person who was really nice to you, who you thought was your best friend, who masked for 3 years while we were engaged. So he kept it up the entire time until he knew I was properly ensnared and in the trap. And then he started bringing in all the punishments and the silent treatment and the denigrating me and the, criticising me. And
for how long did you have to live with that?
It was 8 years.
And was it a moment of revelation?
Yeah. I found myself standing at a hotel window on my birthday, calculating whether the drop was high enough to actually kill me.
How old are you then?
I was 34. And I suddenly woke up at that moment and I thought, oh, I've got 3 little boys at home. Like, what am I doing? Why am I in it? I didn't have an escape route. I didn't have a way out. At that point, I had...
Which is so common.
No independent income. I had 3 small children. Once you're out of the programming game for a very short while, you're considered de-skilled, right? Yeah. So I couldn't go back into my high-earning job.
You would immediately be overtaken by another programming language or 10 that other people were better at.
Which I could have picked up in no time at all, but the industry would not.
Yeah.
They weren't going to hire me.
Yeah.
And I also have, how would I pay rent? How would I do anything? Yeah. How could I get out of it? I couldn't see a way out, so I was going to drop myself out of a hotel window. And it's not uncommon, suicide in controlling relationships, because you cannot see an escape. But I woke up, and one of the reasons I had tried to earlier, some months before that, we'd been to counselling for a year, which obviously didn't help because it doesn't help in abusive relationships at all. It just gives them more tools to abuse you with. Yeah. And I had said, look, this isn't working. We need to split up for the sake of the children. And he had said, if you ever leave me, you won't live very long. And if you ever get another boyfriend, he won't live very long either. At which point I thought, oh, right, I can't leave because he'll kill me. And I believed him. So I stayed and I just got sicker and sicker and sicker. I got ill. I got repeated illnesses. I was hospitalised. They didn't know what was wrong with me. And it was just the stress was breaking down my body, yeah. But then I had the hotel moment. At which point I thought, he says if I leave, he'll kill me. But if I stay with him, I'm definitely going to die because I'm either going to do it myself or my body's going to give out. So I've got to take the gamble and find a way. And I had no idea how to find a way. But I decided at that hotel window that I was going somehow.
I was about to ask about when you've got a power that is your writing, a superpower, let's be honest. It seems like you've got a few superpowers from... did it end up being a tool to enable you to find what is good again, to empower you away from what was writing a part of that? Was that...
So I I stopped writing while I was with him because, of course, they take away everything that feeds you.
Yeah.
And I started writing just as I was leaving him. I restarted. And so I went into the world as a single parent, trying to relaunch my writing career, which had some kind of a start in my 20s and then just stopped. And I had to start again from scratch, and I had to start again with no money, and I was waitressing and, admin at a nightclub and all of these minimum wage. Adding to that CV with my minimum wage jobs.
Yeah.
And teaching creative writing, which I just picked up at the end of my marriage. I got offered this post teaching creative writing because I sent a chapter of the novel I'd suddenly started writing.
That's nice.
To the Arts Council, and I got given a grant.
That's wicked.
And then the person who offered me a grant moved on to the University of Sussex and got in touch with me and said, "Do you want to teach on our course?"
How wonderful.
But it was only 2 hours a week, so it was 60 quid a week.
Sure, but you're describing these creative footholds, aren't you, that were so needed
essential.
At the time.
And also for me, that was both the grant and that job where someone is taking me seriously as a writer.
1,000,000%.
Someone is taking me seriously as a writer, and it's so important for me at that point.
It must be like slowly, surely coming out of the most horrible fog.
I didn't have any admiration for myself. I was in survival mode.
Right.
But I found...
When did it turn from surviving to perhaps thriving? Maybe that's too big a leap, but did that take years?
Well, yeah, the thriving took a little while.
Yeah.
There was a whole horrible post-separation abuse period as well.
I'm sure.
Where I was literally in fear of my life. I had my car tampered with. I was being followed. It all got extremely messy and complicated. I got an injunction out. I had a police alarm in my flat. So I was just surviving. I was just trying to stay alive and trying to put food in my kids' mouths and keep a roof over our head, and send off a few poems while I was at it. That was my life for a little while. And gradually, I've improved it by degrees. But I never wrote about what happened in my marriage until 2 years ago.
Really?
Because I wanted to protect my children, because I wanted to protect me, because on some level I was still scared of him. He's still alive. And I had been effectively silenced by my fear and my need to protect the kids. I started doing a lot of emotional processing about my fear of angry men at that point. And of course it all went back to the death threat, which had never been lifted. And as I started to process it, I did start to write about it. And I thought, I want to put this out in the world. I feel the need to share this story because I haven't, and I have been silenced, and it feels important. And what was really both shocking and powerful was that when I did, so many people came into the comments saying, I had this, this is exactly, were we married to the same person? Even to the point of that story I told about the line where he said, if there was a fire and you could only save one of us, which one would you save? I had 2 women say, my ex said exactly those words to me. Like, do they come out of a playbook? What is going on? I thought that was uniquely warped, that he would ask that question. But it turns out not.
Did they in some way realise that there is some good that can come from that? Was there a moment?
Oh, as soon as I was sharing that and people were... This sense of suddenly like a big community suddenly grew around the pieces I was writing about my relationship. And I think all of us suddenly felt less alone.
Wow.
And recognised, well, we can't be to blame because there's this common factor here, which is we were being abused by someone else and we hadn't signed up for it. We didn't knowingly marry abusers. They love bombed us. We were vulnerable. I was a very vulnerable young woman. I was a clear target, but I didn't know I was a target. I actually thought I was a really strong person. I was a woman working in tech. I drank pints. I was extremely capable in so many ways, highly intelligent, strong woman.
What would you say to that young Ros drinking pints now, unaware of what was then to come? Like, what advice could you possibly give now?
I mean, I would so want myself not to go into that relationship, but I did need to find out that I had value. I would like to think I didn't need to be abused. I'd love to think there was a better way.
Yeah.
I mean, if I could have just emotionally processed my childhood effectively, I have, a therapeutic method that really works for me now. If I had that then, that would have been much better than going into an abusive marriage. But that's what it took at the time for me to go, this is outrageous. Like, you can't treat me like this. I am worth more than this.
I sort of hesitate to say this, but there might well be people watching and listening
to
this and will suddenly want to contact you, for example, or find you on Substack. Does that happen a lot? Do you mind that?
No, absolutely not. I have my main piece, the piece that has sort of went viral in Substack terms, is called Nobody Knew I Was in an Abusive Marriage, Including Me.
Still being funny.
Can't help it. You got to laugh or else, And I describe some of these things there, including the if you'd say, who would you say from a fire? And that has got hundreds. I mean, it's got something like 350 comments and counting. And every so often, someone new finds it and restacks it and shares it, and it takes off again. It has another little burst, like you blow on the embers. And I have that pinned to my main Substack page, so anyone can find it, and the comments are open. And people share their stories.
It's kind of wonderful. It's sad. It's sad that it continues to echo, but it will continue to echo
until women stop getting into those relationships, or until men stop treating women that way. So
before we go, this has been a deeply emotional and unbelievable, and I thank you so much for the honesty and the transparency. There's so much. You described at the moment what you're putting out at the moment as Dickens-like serial, but what next? I
would very much like to get the book version of my memoir out there, and it's not a memoir, if you know what I mean. It's not the ME isn't about me, but really so much about speaking openly about coercive control, it as a way to connect with other people who are going through it, and to help people avoid getting into those situations themselves. So I have that's in development at the moment.
Amazing.
I've taken some of the stuff from Substack and I've reshaped it, and I've also built in the whole engine of understanding how our childhood set us up for the things that go wrong in our adulthoods. And that maybe the going wrong, it's definitely how it seems at the time, but maybe it isn't wrong after all, because the results of it are really powerful. The growth that you get on the other side, if you take the growth and don't stay a victim, but get into the strength of being a survivor and empower yourself by telling your story, then it's a good thing. Then it turns into, it was hell, but it made me who I am. And I know who I am now, and I know I have value now. And that's really important.
What a perfect place to end. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much, James.
If you enjoyed this week's show, please follow us on Instagram at StoryCodePod. Subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Trust me, it really does help. StoryCo is a Telltale Industries production. It's recorded in Studio One at the brilliant TYX Studios here in King's Cross. It's produced by Jago Lee, assistant produced by Nellie Batt. Special thanks to Craig Hepsinstall, Jack Freegar, Tyler Newton, Issa Gibson. I'm James Kirkham. This has been a masterclass in how storytelling pays in this modern media landscape. Go out, tell a story that matters, and we'll see you next week.